Coming up on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, we discuss the 2023 vacated targets and the impact it could have on fantasy football. We're going to discuss some of the teams that have the most vacated targets, including the Panthers, Texans, and Titans. Could we sleepers and breakouts from those teams? We're also going to discuss the teams with the least vacated targets, including the Chargers, Browns, and Seahawks. Does that mean that some of those guys will bust? Let's discuss that and more on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. What is up, folks? We got another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Lamarco. Excited to break down one of my favorite analysis I do every year called the Available Targets Analysis. And essentially today we're going to discuss which teams have the most vacated targets heading into 2023 and how that could impact fantasy football. Before we do, make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And of course, make sure you jump over to razzball.com. We're doing great stuff on the football, baseball, basketball, and hockey side. So make sure you go there, check out whatever you need to win your fantasy leagues. But today's show, let's break down these vacated targets. If you've seen my article in the past, I talk about also I factor in the impact that play callers have on vacated targets. So let's get into it right now, and I'll kind of break down what I mean by that and how the analysis differs from just vacated targets. So if you hop over to razzball.com, the first thing you're going to see is the vacated chart analysis. And from left to right, you'll see the teams, the 2022 dropbacks, and the 2023 projected dropbacks. How do we get that? Well, first off, I've reviewed since 2011, I reviewed every single play caller and how many times per year how many average dropbacks per game they have each year, okay? Why is that important? Well, some teams have outlier seasons. Some teams throw a little bit more than usual. Some teams throw less than usual. And so it could have a huge impact on projecting available targets. If a team we know threw 100 times more than average the previous year, we know that they're probably going to lose about 100 vacated targets just from pass volume alone. So that's why it's important to break down, projected dropbacks versus what actually happened, because you'll see on the far right of your screen, coaching changes matter. Carolina Panthers, for example, moving to Frank Reich. On average, Frank Reich's teams threw the ball 121 more times. So when you couple that with the 212 available targets that you'll see on the top of your screen, that jumps into 333 projected targets for the Panthers skill position group. That is big time news for guys like whoever the wide receiver one is, Adam Thielen, Terrace Marshall, DJ Chark. You also have Jonathan Mingo, Hayden Hurst, Miles Sanders. So that's kind of how you view the chart. So when you're looking at this for the future, if you go to razzball.com, there's a link to the article in your description. It shows you basically who has the most new available targets every team. Once you factor in not only the vacated targets from 2022, but also the projected dropbacks based on historical dropback data. Now, you might be asking yourself, what if it's a first-time play caller? Great example of this is Drew Petzing, the new Arizona Cardinals OC. Well, we use basically the dropbacks while he was on the coaching staffs for Cleveland and Minnesota. So, for example, when you scroll down, you'll see Arizona down here. We're projecting 139 less dropbacks this season, which drops their 217 vacated targets, including guys like DeAndre Hopkins and A.J. Green, Robbie Anderson, Chosen Anderson. They had 217 vacated targets, but once you factor in the new play calling style, it drops all the way down to 78. So what does that mean for Marquise Hollywood Brown? What does that mean for other players coming in? That's big for Rondell Moore and also, Zach Ertz coming back. And what does that mean for James Conner? That's kind of the thought process for this one. So let's just kind of quickly talk about the top teams. All right. So first of all, the Carolina Panthers at 333, there is a huge opportunity late in drafts to scoop up whoever potentially could be the wide receiver one. Now, that's an easier said than done statement, all right? Who's going to be the wide receiver one? Is it Adam Thielen? Is it Jonathan Mingo? Is it Terrace Marshall? Well, that's what the next few months are really going to help us kind of decipher who's Bryce Young's go-to guy. Is it Hayden Hurst? All these guys are going so late in drafts, you could easily take two Carolina Panthers wide receivers and see which one emerges. I just did an analysis on the impact of rookie quarterbacks, which is also ironically the Texans at number 2. This is going to impact them. But they 50% of the time, 16 of the last Over the past 5 years, of 16 rookie quarterbacks attempted at least 250 attempts, 8 of them supported a top 36 wide receiver. So none of the Panthers or Texans wide receivers are going in the top 36. So there's a buying opportunity. There is plenty of available targets. And the second team, of course, Houston Texans with CJ Stroud. I think Dalton Schultz right now is one of my favorite mid-round tight ends. If you can't get your hands on Goddard, Darren Waller in like round 6 range, and you miss out on the top guys, I think Dalton Schultz is a very underrated asset. I think you got the 49ers style offense coming on to with Bobby Slowick, and they featured George Kittle. Prior to that was Jordan Reed, those type of players. So I think Dalton Schultz is a fantastic buy. And plus, rookie quarterbacks don't have a major impact on tight ends as much as they do wide receivers for fantasy finishes. So I like Dalton Schultz a lot because of that. Jumping down to number 3, it's the Tennessee Titans with 311 available opportunities. I think, listen, Treylon Burks, in my opinion, if DeAndre Hopkins signs there, whether he does or not, this is the point. Even if Hopkins signs, there's 311 opportunities available by moving. Number 1, they moved to Tim Kelly. Number 2, when you factor in Malik Willis playing a few starts last year, if Tannehill can at least get back to his norms playing 16 games, there's a lot of opportunity here for them to see more pass volume with Ryan Tannehill under center. And even if Hopkins is signed, Treylon Burks has a lot of additional opportunities where he could still flourish, and the same goes for Chigakongu. So I love the fact that this kind of solidifies my thoughts on Treylon Burks as a wide receiver 2 in 2023. Even if Hopkins signs, I think if anything, it's only going to help the offense look better because they have nobody to compete for targets. Let's slide down to the fades in this analysis. And as you can see, some of these teams will be a surprise. Like the Chargers, for example, is a very good starting point. They have the least. They only have 13 available opportunities once you factor in the vacated targets and projected dropbacks. Now, you'll see that they have a minus 92 in projected dropbacks. That's because they're moving to Kellen Moore. Under Joe Lombardi, they were one of the most pass-heavy offenses in football. And listen, Kellen Moore is going to throw a bunch. They're going to still throw a lot. But at the same time, it's not going to be as pass-heavy, which is going to impact their available targets. Now, this is really big for Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are the 1-2. Okay, Gerald Everett's the tight end, and he's going to be a factor. Austin Eckler is also a huge factor. Currently today, Quentin Johnson's going wide receiver 44 in drafts, and Josh Palmer's going inside the top 200 at wide receiver 70. Based on this analysis, there's not a lot of opportunities for them behind Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and when you factor in that Gerald Everett and Austin Eckler are going to get portions of that pie, I think there's just better upside plays for fantasy football. But I do think both those guys are basically like the wide receiver handcuffs. And if something happens to Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, you definitely want to scoop those guys up on waivers. The next one is the Cleveland Browns. Now, there isn't much of a shakeup in the play caller style. That's why you only see a -2, so we're projecting no difference. But they only have 58 vacated targets. Basically, Kareem Hunt is the majority of those. Which leads to about 56 available opportunities. Now, one way to look at this is Elijah Moore is coming in. Now, he'll probably monopolize most of those. But if you think that Elijah Moore is going to command closer to 100 targets maybe in this offense, it's going to have to come from somewhere. So I do think that that's something to factor into this analysis a little bit is maybe Amari Cooper sees a little less targets, or David Njoku, or Donovan Peoples-Jones is probably the obvious one. But I do think that this is something to watch. I know Deshaun Watson is there, but even when Deshaun Watson was under Bill O'Brien, they weren't that pass-happy of an offense. So just something to think about when drafting. I still like Cooper a lot this year, but I think that this is something to factor in. If it's a tiebreaker, the targets for Elijah Moore are going to have to come from the players on the field. So I do think that's a factor. And then Seattle. Seattle only has 57 vacated new available targets. In my analysis, some of this has to do with a slight dip back down in pass volume, and also they only vacated about 75 targets. So 57 is low. This is Jackson Smith and Jigba. Listen, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf are under contract for the next 3 years. I think that Jackson Smith, it's going to be really hard for Geno Smith, who I love, did very well last year, to support 3 top 36 wide receivers. I think that this is also a reflection on if you think that Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be more on par with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf this season, you have to downgrade those two guys. You have to drop them maybe a round or two than you normally would draft them because Jackson Smith is going to be more of an equal than a third option. Then that's going to impact somebody. But I think overall this is going to be like more of a Calvin Ridley, CeeDee Lamb when they were like more wide receiver threes their first season. And I think that's something similar to see with Jackson Smith and Jigba as his upside. But I think that the downside is that Geno's like a slightly above average quarterback based on his production last year, and he's the third option. And so you can take that for whatever you want. But that's how you're going to use the analysis. So when you go to razzball.com, go check it out, the 2023 available targets analysis. I did provide an overview and introduction at the bottom and also some insights like I talked about today. I talked about the Titans, the Cowboys, and the Lions and why I like those teams a lot. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I like CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. So go check it out over on razzball.com. And also check out all the great articles we got on razzball.com right now from all our great writers. Make sure we're in the middle of baseball season. The NBA Finals just finished, but go make sure you check out the basketball and hockey articles we got over there as well. But make sure you go and subscribe to Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. Thank you again for joining today. Let me know in the comments what you think about adding in historical dropback data to give us a more realistic available opportunities for 2023. Go check out the article, leave a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. I love you guys. Appreciate you. I will see you next time. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. You can follow me at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. See you later.